Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Up Close on METV. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, station manager for Manatee Educational Television. And it's our great pleasure to welcome back today U.S. Congressman Vern Buchanan. Congressman, thank you so much again for taking the time out to inform and tell our citizens in this community about some of the great things that are going on in this congressional district.
And thank you so much, Charles, for your continued leadership in educating people in the community on a lot of important issues.
Well, Congressman, one of the key things that comes up, throughout this community is the fact about partisanship. You see that, you hear it on the news, you see it in the paper, and partisanship really does play a factor. However, you've been recognized for the bipartisanship that you've played in Congress. First of all, tell us a little bit about the partisanship that exists and how you play a vital role in going against that grain.
There's a lot of big issues that people ask me about. The most important issue in Sarasota and Manatee counties is why can't you guys get along? I care about getting things done. Right. I don't like all the partisan bickering. And I guess it just comes from my background in business for 30 years before I did this. It's about the organization winning. It's about the enterprise being successful. It's about working together as a team. That's the message I take to Washington. Democrats and Republicans, let's work together to work on the big issues, whether it's tax reform or making sure Social Security and Medicare are viable long-term. And we've had good success, and I co-chair the Florida delegation with a Democrat, where we try to come together, I'd say, a couple of times a month on issues that are important to our regions, but also to Florida.
And before we go any further, sir, I'd just like to, to mention the fact that recently you were ranked by the nonpartisan Lugar Center and the Georgetown University McCourt School of Public Policy as one of the most bipartisan members in Congress. And that has a lot to do with being able to deal with others, working with the other side of the aisle from time to time, going across, the grain, so to speak, to come to, some mutual beneficial decisions.
Well, you can't get anything done in Washington, or not much, unless you have 60 votes in the Senate. And the only way you're going to do that is on a bipartisan basis. I don't really spend a lot of time and energy doing bipartisan bills, because I know at the end of the day I can't get them passed into law. We passed a lot of different bills, even on tax reform this year. You try to work together to get things done. And I can just tell you, I've done a lot of town halls, 75, Charles, over the years. People want us to find a way to work together to solve their issues and their problems. And the only way we can do that is to work together. And I tell my friends, Democrats and Republicans, we're all Americans. Right. Let's try to work together and get things done for the people.
And clearly, sir, as chair of the bipartisan Florida delegation, and in that position of leadership, you've really taken bipartisanship even a step further. And clearly on that, as you've been holding hearings on proposals about the drilling off the coast of Florida, and you've opposed that for a good many years. Tell us why and why that's important to you.
Well, when I first got up here quite a few years ago, to me, one of the biggest issues is offshore drilling. We had people want to drill 3 miles off, Manatee County's beaches, Anna Maria's beaches. And if you look at it, it's just bad policy all the way around. But not just from an environmental standpoint, clean water, clean beaches leads to better real estate values, but also economic development and tourism is critical. And so it just makes no sense. If they want to do that in Texas and Louisiana, that's up to them, but they're not going to do it off of our shores. And we've worked together, Kathy Castor and myself and others, on a bipartisan basis to make sure that doesn't happen. And it's an ongoing battle because we always have the energy companies that are always pushing the envelope, would like to do more in this region. We're not going to let them.
And clearly, you know, that's an important issue to the citizens of Florida. Throughout Florida is drilling as well. So, you know, obviously, you know, this is something that you need to continue to work on, you know, as it moves forward. But I'd like to kind of segue, if I may, sir, in talking about environmental issues, that you opposed President Trump's withdrawal from the Paris agreements. And tell us a little bit about that and why you thought that was important and why you think we should still be in the Paris Agreement.
Well, I think there's over 100 countries in the world. There was one or two that was against it, and I thought the U.S., there's enough science out there. It's something we have to clearly look at and take it into consideration, and I just thought for the U.S. to pull out wasn't the right thing. And I'll stand with the president where it makes sense, but I'm going to stand when it doesn't make sense. And getting back to the drilling offshore, it was something at one point, I think the administration was clearly looking at this as an opportunity, right, and I pushed back. So when it makes sense, I'm with the president on tax reform and some deregulation to help small businesses, that's fine, but when I think he's not right, I'm going to take that stand as well.
Well, the perfect segue, if I may, Congressman, is the last time that we had a conversation was about just before the tax reform bill, which is now law. And I'd like to get your impression about the final bill and how it's had an impact, and what do you see about the benefits of that tax bill?
Well, the biggest thing is 90%. There's a lot of misinformation, but I chair the Tax Policy Committee. Right. 90% of Americans are going to get a tax cut. But I think my sense when I've been involved for 5 or 6 years working on this is we're looking to find a way to grow the economy. In the last 10 years, the last administration, they grew at 1.5%, the slowest growth in 50 years. We had more businesses closing in the last decade than opening, which is unprecedented in the history of our country. So the idea is how do we get the economy to grow from 1.5% to 3%, 3.5%, which will mean it'll help small businesses, it'll create more jobs, and create bigger paychecks. So I think there's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy. John Horn, one of the restaurant owners here locally, you know him very well, he came up, I had a hearing that I chaired, and made it very clear to everybody the impact it's had for his businesses, which in turn, he's given pay raises to his employees, bonuses, and he's in a position where he can do more for the community. So I think it's the proof's in the pudding. I think it's been in the last 5 or 6 months a lot of enthusiasm. The enthusiasm for small business about the expectation the next 2 to 5 years is very strong right now because of tax reform, deregulating different things, and you feel like there's a sense that Washington's trying to help small businesses be more successful, startups, encouraging entrepreneurship. That means a lot to our economy, and it's going to mean bigger paychecks. There's no question about it. As you get lower unemployment, they're going to have to pay more. And I think you're going to start seeing this. You've seen the stagnation in paychecks, but you're going to see the big difference going the other way now. I think where people are going to get substantial increases pretty much across the board because we have more opportunities, more work than we have workers. At the end of the day, that's a good thing for paychecks.
And Congressman, I think recently the numbers came out on the employment. Employment is at a record high, since the 1960s. This tax bill, would you foresee this giving more opportunity to small businesses, perhaps to hire more or to expand their businesses, and give those small businesses more opportunity?
They said the unemployment rate is the lowest since 1969. So pretty much anybody that wants a job, I think in Manatee County, this region, 3%, which is pretty much full employment. But there's no question about it. The tax code and deregulating and taking some of the regulation off the backs of small businesses and startups is making a big difference. But it's also about confidence.
Right.
As a business guy for 30 years, you're thinking about, do I want to expand? Should I expand? You look at what the environment, the financial environment, maybe for the next 3 to 5 years. People are very enthusiastic about what they're seeing. And then last year, the stock market was up 30%. Yeah. I think at the end of this year, it'll be up 10 to 15% again. There's a lot of people, half the money in the stock market goes to pensions and other groups. It has made a big difference. And I think people are really bullish about the country. And my mindset, I want to make America the best place to do business in the world, which will also help our workers and bigger paychecks.
Well, Congressman, one of the most important thing, or clearly a very important thing that was part of the tax bill was your efforts in the bill to help the citrus industry. Yeah. The citrus industry is going through a tough time now. You've got greening, you've got issues with crops. Why was it important for you to reach out to the citrus industry to see how best you could help?
Well, when you think of Florida, you think of beaches, but right by that you think of orange juice. And the devastation to the industry, many places they lost all their crops, 90% of their crops. It's been one of the worst productions they've had in a long time. It's because of not just the hurricanes, but it's also because of citrus greening and other things that are impacting the fruit. But what we're able to do, instead of writing off, we want them to get back in and replant trees. Instead of writing them off over 17 years, approximately, they can write it off the first year. I think it'll mean another $100 million in capital to the citrus industry. And it does create hundreds of thousands of jobs, which is a big thing for Florida. We think about construction, we think about tourism, but the three-legged stool, the other one, is the agriculture. And it's important that we make sure we stand with them. And a lot of the growers came to me and said, Vern, we're going to be out of business. We're not going to be able to continue. We're going to have to sell it off for development. And I think having that balance, because a lot of times when you get into a recession, tourism might go down, construction might go down, but agriculture, people still need to eat and other things. So we're one of the largest growers of citrus in the country. Texas has some. I think they're behind us in California, but I think we're clearly number one. And then, of course, Tropicana here. They have a gigantic plant, create a lot of good paying jobs, a lot of good benefits. We want to make sure that they've got the fruit for production to build their products, which they've got incredible products.
And I think you hit the nail right on the head. You think of Florida, you think of orange juice and oranges. So anything that you can do to help that citrus industry continue to grow and prosper is a good thing.
I remember when I first came to Florida, I'd send a little gift basket back. It'd be filled with orange juice and oranges, I should say, and maybe some orange juice, but grapefruits and that's when you think of Florida, that's a big part of who we are. And I want to make sure we stand with the growers.
And I think we want to continue to see this too, because agriculture is a vital part of the continued growth and prosperity for the state. But I want to take a moment, if I may, sir. You're a senior member of the House Ways and Means Committee, a very powerful committee, and you were recently appointed chair of the Tax Subcommittee. Tell us a little bit about your goals, the legislative goals that you have, and what you see going forward.
Well, we got tax reform done, 90% cut in taxes for everybody. My bill is on pass-throughs, mainly for what they call small businesses, trying to lower their rates, and we did about 25%. But the idea is to let individuals and businesses keep more of what they earn. And that's my goal. And now where we're at, we got the new tax law. I'd say it's 80%. We want to continue to refine that. So I'm going to reach out to citizens in Manatee and Sarasota County, get their thoughts, their input. It's not a perfect product, but we want to continue to improve that because it's been 30 years since the last time we really addressed that. One of the big areas that we're talking about right now is how to make the individual tax cut for individuals permanent. I think it's only 5 years. We want to make it permanent long term, which I think will be a big thing. And then we want to encourage more startups and have small businesses, like I mentioned, John Horn and others, keep more of what they earn so they can expand and grow. So I'm very excited about where we're at right now in terms of growing the economy in the United States.
And let me ask you this, sir. You look around and you see the growth in Sarasota and Manatee County development. Are you encouraged by the way the business is developing? The startups that you see out there?
There's a lot of great places in the country. I think Tampa to Naples I'm very bullish on long term. Now, that being said, and I don't know if you want to talk about it, but we do got to make sure that we get the infrastructure, the roads and bridges in place, because we all come here because it's one of the most beautiful places on the planet. But you've got to have roads and a lot of construction, whether it's business expansion or residential expansion. It puts more stress on the system we have. So we need to make sure our leaders here in the community are stepping up and doing that we've got the resources and the dollars to get in front of this, because you can't slow it down. You might slow it down to some extent, but not much. People want to be here. I'm from Michigan. A lot of people come from the Midwest, but now we're seeing a lot from the Northeast and others, because this is the best place on the planet. And part of it is we have a low tax situation here. A lot of states are paying all the federal taxes like everybody else here, but then they're paying another 10-12% on top of that the city, county, and state governments are taking from them. So that's a big issue, and that's why a lot of them are coming here. Estate planning and taxes are lower here. So we're one of the lowest states in the country for taxing our people, which I think is a good thing.
And one of the things, sir, that you just mentioned is that, clearly infrastructure is a major issue. I think if you ask any citizen, Manatee or Sarasota, they'll talk about roads and congestion and, the decay that's in bridges and areas around. So that's a big area of interest, for the quality of life in this community.
Yeah, our leaders need to be looking 10 to 50 years down the road. What the needs are going to be. I mean, to me, it's going to be fairly clear, and we need to make sure we're making the investments in terms of roads and bridges. I know the bridges over the Manatee River are being talked about in terms of opportunities there. I tell people a story. One day I was leaving downtown Sarasota, had to get to Tampa. I left at 4:30, had a 6 o'clock meeting, hour and a half. I knew it was rush hour. I drove, and I finally got off at University, went down to 41 and thought I'd go up that way, or 301. And an hour and a half later, I was just getting into Palmetto, so I called and canceled it when I had a margarita down in downtown Bradenton.
Well, there you go. And I think you're one of the many people that run into that conflict. And I think that's a clear indication for this community that they have to step up and look at traffic congestion as a serious issue that they have to work on now as opposed to later. Because the building roads, building bridges is such a time-consuming, long-term process that unless it starts now, it's not going to get finished.
No, we have to start now, and again, looking out 10 to 50 years. And then part of my job is to work with locals, now at the county level in terms of governance, but also at the state level, all of us working together as a team to make sure, because a lot of the money comes to Tallahassee, but we've got to get the money down here, and we will.
And Congressman, if I may, I'd like to talk about another serious issue, a social issue that's there, and that's that this area, the Suncoast, is kind of an epicenter for the heroin crisis. It's a terrible, terrible tragedy. It's throughout the country, but this area has seen its fair share of tragedy. You've been working very hard on legislation to help fight heroin and drug abuse for years. Tell us a little bit about your bills and where they stand and what's the status?
Well, again, when I ran for Congress, I thought my focus would be on a lot of different things. I didn't realize that we'd be dealing with this challenge, but I would just tell you that I'd say 8 to 10 years ago, I had a very good friend. I had lost his son, and then 2 women that came into my office, one from Manatee and one from Sarasota. Both lost their son to the overdose deaths, and then we did a lot to shut down a lot of these pill mills with the Attorney General and others, all of us working together. But it's still a crisis, and as we've shut those down, I think someone said at one time we had 1,300 pill mills, and quite a few here, but a lot of them in the other side of the state in Broward County. So we made a lot of good progress, but now they've gone to heroin and fentanyl and these other drugs. And we've got good resources down here. We've got a substantial bill. And our goal, I think we originally put about 20 million, 25 million. 6 million came to this region. We've got another 28 million that's coming. So we are moving resources down here. But And there's a lot of different areas that it focuses on, but one of my biggest issue is prevention. Unfortunately, I've got a nephew that's suffered with prescription drugs. Is a semi-pro type hockey player, both knees. It started out where you just take it for pain relief.
Right.
One thing leads to another, and then you're addicted.
Right.
So we've got to find a way to make sure that we do everything we can to prevent the people starting these drugs early, and you see it even in the high schools and junior highs.
Right.
So I'm very big on prevention, because once you go through that door, many of them don't come back.
That's
it's
very
brutal,
true.
and what it does to them, their families, and a community. So we're going to continue. We've offered our bill with 7 different points. Take too long to go through all of it, but just know that we're going to do everything we can to bring the resources and fight this fight and make sure we win at the end of the day.
And sir, I know that you're a great spokesman for law enforcement in this community and in Sarasota as well. Law enforcement is doing all that they can. There's a great many resources and services that are out there, as you said, to help educate people. But sometimes, you just need a little bit more help, maybe a little bit more effort on behalf of places like Centerstone and others in Sarasota.
Centerstone's been great, and I focused on prevention, but also obviously a lot of the dollars goes towards treatment,
Right.
as well as local sheriff's office and police organizations have been terrific, and they've made a lot of busts lately that'll make a big impact, positive impact on our communities. So it's a team effort. It's not just me, it's all of us working together. We can't afford to lose one more person. And I'll mention the other thing, a lot of people don't know, it's impacting a lot of seniors as well. So we've set up a database where they can go on and realize how to treat pain or issues that they might have without getting on these opioid drugs. There's other ways to do that. I was in the Manatee Memorial the other day, and they were telling me that if people that start on these prescription drugs, some of them, 5 or 10% get hooked on them. And it's just like, unfortunately, an alcoholic sometimes, they start, many times they can't quit, and that's what's happening with these drugs. So we've got to get these drugs and manage them more aggressively so people aren't taking them in the first place. And so there's a lot more to be done, but I'd like to think that we're moving in the right direction, but it's clearly a team effort.
And again, sir, I want to segue from something that you mentioned. You've been recently received the Guardian of Senior Rights from the 60 Plus Association for your long-term record of protecting Social Security and Medicare. Now, your district, the 16th district, is one of the oldest districts in the country, and many seniors rely upon Social Security and Medicare. What is being done to ensure that the seniors will continue to get their benefits as we kind of move forward?
Well, it's a great point. The committee I'm on, you mentioned one of the most powerful committees. The reason it is that we oversee Medicare and Social Security. Our
Right.
committee does. And that's my commitment, is make sure they're viable long-term. And we're going to probably need some tweaks and adjustment to make sure they're not only good for the current seniors, but for their children and grandchildren. They're exceptional programs, as we know, but they're put in place in the 30s and 60s. And that's why I hope to lead an effort, a bipartisan effort, where we can work together to make sure they're viable long-term. They're saying Social Security, I had a hearing the other day, I'm on that committee, subcommittee for Social Security. It's good till 2034. Medicare, it depends who you talk to, another 8 years. But I want to make sure they're viable long-term, because I would say probably a third of seniors that get to be 65 or 67, that's all they have. And we've got to make sure that's there long-term. And then the other thought is that you've got 10,000 people turning 65, 10 to 12,000 every day for the next 30 years.
Right.
And they're living longer. My mother-in-law, bless her heart, she's with us in the winter, has been for the last 20 years. She comes to Florida. She's 99, going strong.
God bless her.
Lives by herself.
God bless her.
And we try to get her some help, and she fires them every week or so. So, she doesn't need any help. At least she thinks so. But it's just amazing. People are living longer.
Right.
They're taking care of themselves a little bit better. The medicine's better.
Right.
But that being said, we've got to make sure Social Security and Medicare are there long-term. That's my commitment to our seniors.
And as I said, sir, this is one of the oldest districts in the thing. Sarasota and Manatee have a wealth of seniors. They contribute, every day, to this community. And I think it's vital for them to understand your level of commitment to their long-term support of Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, it's not about me. I tell people, I'm a blue-collar kid. I'm humbled to be a congressman, but I'm a representative. And I would say almost half of my district's 55 and older. Right. Probably a third is 65 and older. I work for them. So I want to make sure that these two programs are critical, that they're viable long-term. But to do that, I've got to provide some leadership, and we do it on a bipartisan basis. This isn't a Republican or Democratic issue. Mm-hmm. This is something we should work together on to protect our seniors, not just here, but throughout the country.
And sir, if I may, equally as important and throughout your district is the number of veterans that are here. I think the estimate is over 80,000 veterans in Sarasota, Manatee County. And whether it's the Sarasota National Cemetery or, something on veterans' health care or, helping a veteran find, the right resources and services that are out there, you've always been kind of a leader, in helping veterans. First of all, one of the key things that you sponsored was a veteran ID card. And what's the status on that? And why was that such an important issue for you?
As I mentioned to you earlier, I do a lot of town halls.
Oh, you do?
And we have a lot of veterans. You mentioned not just in my area, but 2 million we have in Florida, but right. Focusing on our area. And a veteran said it'd be very nice. I've served for 4 years, but not 20. So I got to carry around these papers, DD 214 papers. Right. And many of them have lost them. They're older. They're not sure where they're at. But it'd be nice to have a card that would identify their service for various reasons, whether it be discounts or just the pride of being a veteran. And so that's something that we've worked on. As you mentioned, my bill, but it came from an idea from one of our veterans. And the bill became law, and we're shipping them out right now. I mean, veterans are getting those. They're free of charge, and lets every veteran that served that doesn't have an ID card, because if you got more than 20 years service, you'd have one, but under 20 years of service, you don't. So we've fixed that problem, but it was based on an idea from our local veterans. And again, I want to thank all of our veterans for their service, because as they say, freedom is not free.
And again, sir, throughout the time, whether it's at the Sarasota National Cemetery or celebrating, Veterans Fund, or even helping a veteran find, his service records and something, your office has always been kind of in the forefront of helping veterans from the very beginning. Yeah,
we have a young lady, Joni, and she's been with me for 12 years. That's all she does primarily, is focus on veterans' issues. And many times they have benefits they've earned that they haven't got. We fight for them. Many times there's some the records or some of their pins that they've lost or whatever it might be. And then again, the thing on health care, for example, has been a big issue that they've battled. They've been promised, and I want to make sure that federal government keeps the promises to our veterans on health care. And now they're talking about even producing a card or something, a Blue Cross Blue Shield card, that would ideally let veterans have access to the service instead of maybe going over to Pinellas County or somewhere else. So that's something that's been clearly working on and we're getting close with right now.
And that sounds like a great idea, and it'd be much more convenient for a lot of veterans too as they age, as they get older. One thing that I did want to bring up, sir, and this is something that you've been involved with for many years. You fought to extend funding for children's health insurance, and you recently voted against the White House plan to cut $7 billion in funding from the Children's Health Insurance Program. And that's kind of a critical program. Tell us why that was important to you and important to the citizens here in Florida to sustain that.
As I mentioned, I grew up in a blue-collar family. My parents worked in the factory. Every child needs to have health care. The real cost of health care, our seniors and others 50 and older, every child should have health care coverage. And I've been very consistent on that. I was one of the few Republicans back when I first got in Congress, and when they're taking $7 billion away for the children, and we're spending $1 trillion on health care in general for a lot of others out of the federal budget, and they want to take $7 billion from the kids, I said no. And I mentioned it earlier. With the president when it makes good sense, and tax reform and deregulation and helping small businesses. But if you go ahead and mess with our kids in our community here or in the Florida, I'm going to stand with the kids.
And this is something that families throughout the state of Florida have deeply appreciated. Now we've talked about seniors, and we've talked about veterans, we've talked about kids. Now, it wouldn't go without saying unless we mention the fact of your efforts in animal rights. And you were recently recognized, well, the first Florida member of Congress to receive the Humane Society's Legislator of the Year Award for fighting animal cruelty and protecting endangered species. I mean, what a great honor of that was for you. Tell us about those efforts to protect animals, and why is that important to you with all the many other things that are on your plate? Why is this important for you to have this effort?
Well, myself, like a lot of others, we love animals. And again, it wasn't something I came to Congress initially to focus on, but when I see our manatees locally under attack, a lot of them being killed, and talking about, not doing what they need to do in terms of protecting manatees, or the black panther, which is important to Florida, otherwise it goes extinct, or the fact that they're looking at, we got facilities in the country that are using horse slaughter and selling the meat across into Mexico and other places, or doing the horse slaughtering over just on the other side of Mexico, or they're dealing with elephants where they're basically killing them for the tusk or trophies. Someone's got to stand up. Someone's got to have a voice for these animals. So I'm willing to stand in the gap and do what the right thing for our animals, because it's not. We think about dogs and cats. It's not just about them. It's about all the animals.
And to be recognized for your efforts across the board, sir, is certainly a significant contribution that you've made to animal rights, and you're to be applauded for that. Now, Congressman, unfortunately, we only have a couple of minutes left, and there's a couple other questions. You're a supporter of the right to die legislation that was recently signed by the president. Tell us a little bit about that and why that was important to you and why you think that's significant.
Well, it just says if someone's terminally ill, that they have the right, it's called right to try, not the right to die, but the right to try, which means they can try drugs. And many times they're experimental drugs, but they've been through a couple of the stages, and people feel like they got to go somewhere else in the world to get the drugs. So the thought is to make those available if they want them. And we've had a lot of seniors that would like that opportunity to give them some hope and maybe an opportunity. From that standpoint. But it's something that a lot of people feel passionate about, to have the thing. And I would just tell you, sometimes it's hundreds of millions of dollars to get a drug approved. It could take 10 to 20 years, but yet you've got a year. And so that's the idea of the right to try, is to make that available to them. And it did pass in the House, and I think we're on our way to, I think that's been signed off now. So I feel good about that.
And finally, sir, if I may, give us your impression. What do you see on the horizon? What do you see coming up next in Congress? Is it going to be the infrastructure bill that's going to be moving ahead? Where do you see us moving forward? And also, do you see this partisanship kind of still existing, or do you see it, something, with people like yourself trying to make a difference? Because, as you've been recognized across the board for your bipartisanship efforts, people want to see more of that. People want to see more of a, kind of a contribution, a mutual contribution made, so they can make decisions, so they can move forward.
Well, I'm going to continue to push my colleagues, especially in Florida, but throughout the full Congress, finding a way that we can work together to fight for issues that are important to Americans. There's a lot of things going on, Russia and different places, but I can just tell you locally, a lot of people say, hey, I care about local issues, roads and bridges, and we want more funding for that. We'd like to keep more of what we earn. Then the other big thing that I'll continue to focus on is tax reform. We got a tax bill. I think it's a very pro-growth tax bill, but we're going to continue to refine what we've got. We're going to do some listening sessions to give people their thoughts and their ideas. local businesses and individuals to see how we can improve on what we've done. And I think we've come a long way, but frankly, I'm very, very bullish about where we're at as a country in terms of, lowering taxes for everybody, reducing regulations, helping small businesses, and growing bigger paychecks. That's what my focus is primarily on.
Well, Congressman, you've certainly made, during your term in office, a significant contribution to this community, Sarasota and Manatee. Well respected, well admired, throughout this area. You have a great staff of people who are very helpful, knowledgeable, and are willing to, to go an extra step to help people in your district. It's a great pleasure to talk with you, sir, because not only are you informed and knowledgeable, but you also have that level of effort that you always want to put forward to help people throughout this community, and we appreciate that very much. And we would welcome you back anytime to talk about any specific area that you would like to as well.
Well, thank you, Charles. You've been great to help get a chance to get a lot of these issues discussed openly, and you're always very thoughtful. But I also want to thank you for what you have continued to do for our communities. Has been huge for the kids' education. You're at a lot of events that we're in, not just in terms of this one-on-one, that you make a big difference in that feedback in the community. It just helps to educate the community on a lot of the big issues important to them today. So thanks for your leadership and your organization. And you got a great staff as well.
Thank you very much, Congressman. And as I said, it's a great pleasure to talk. To be able to hear from somebody of your caliber and expertise, directly, from Washington to talk to this community is very important. And like I said, we'd welcome you back anytime.
Yeah, this is the best community on the planet.
It surely is. Thank you, sir, and thank you for joining us, and we welcome you back. Anytime that you're back in the neighborhood, we welcome you back.
Okay.
And I want to thank you for joining us on this very special edition of Up Close on METV. If you have any questions or you want to contact the Congressman's office, please go to the webpage on the screen and find out more about how Congressman Buchanan and his staff can help you. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Up Close on METV.